Hello, and welcome to the screencast Revisiting Lesson Planning. My name is John Wargo. I'm a PhD student and TE405 instructor at Michigan State University. This screencast focuses primarily on lesson planning visions for daily lesson level objectives. So really understanding the knowledge and skills of what students need to be able to know and how you need to be able to plan for the English Language Arts lesson at the daily level. So here's our key question for this screencast. What does vision setting look like for planning English Language Arts at the daily lesson level? So when I think about the components of a lesson vision at the daily level, I think of three things. Components for the objective-driven daily lesson vision includes 1. Key points. When I talk about key points, I'm really talking about the knowledge and skills needed for students to be successful in mastering the objective. The second component is the assessment, right? Assessments give us formative data about whether students master the objective, and if they didn't master it, where misconceptions happened along the way. Strong assessments, as we will sort of soon find out, are aligned and scaffolded. Lesson assessments inform our instructional method choices, our ongoing checks for student understandings during class, and where we pick up with our instruction in the next class session. The third component is an exemplar student response. An exemplar student response for the lesson assessment or exit slip provides us with a clear illustration of mastery at the appropriate level of rigor. We should be able to look at the response and answer yes to this question. Is the type of work students need to do to drive towards both the daily objective at the right level of rigor and toward the broader vision and goal for powerful English Language Arts, right? Exemplar student responses inform how we strengthen our key points in lesson assessment. They also inform the methods we choose and help us build strong classroom culture with our students. But let's just quickly define some terms. What's an objective? When I talk about an objective, I talk about a lesson level goal. What necessarily needs to happen for a lesson in this one day of English Language Arts or this one day of mathematics? Why are objectives important? Well, they give us something to work towards. They help us as beginning teachers identify the scope and sequence for our day, our unit, and a year. How do we know if our objectives are good? So here are 4 criteria that I think really helped me as a beginning teacher think about my own daily lesson level vision. Is it measurable? Is it rigorous yet feasible? Is it meaningful to students? And is it meaningful to me as an instructor? So let's take a look at an upper elementary English Language Arts example and begin to unpack an objective. Here's our objective for the screencast. Students will be able to analyze what motivates a character's actions by making inferences and supporting their explanations with evidence from the text. So here is a developed vision or my key points. So this is actually just one part of the vision. Take a minute to read my sample key points. As we begin to look at my key points, you probably are wondering why there's a red line and a blue circle. So I love to underline the knowledge or the nouns of my lesson objective. Similarly, I like to circle the verbs and or the how my students will be able to accomplish this lesson level goal. So for the what, or the knowledge students need to know, I have this word motivation. And I defined it as motivations are the things that drive us, or characters, to take certain actions and do the things we do, such as the things that happen to us or around us, or the traits that make us who we are. So my example, because we're not working from a primary text together, is if Sally's determined to go to college, and she has the opportunity to go to a summer camp for college prep, she's going to be motivated to raise the money to go, right? Very generic example. Many of you probably can find better definitions of motivations, especially as it pertains to a singular text or story. But for the purposes of the screencast, this is just me sort of trying to show you that the knowledge is the word that we're going to define in order to help us begin to unpack the how, or this verb. So the how. The reading strategy that we're going to use. So I have, in order to analyze what motivates a character's actions, good readers think about the events in the story that affect the character and what they know about who the character is. Then they draw conclusions about why the character does what they do, right? So in this the skills part, this analyze, you're probably understanding like, oh yeah, you're using the reading strategy of making inferences, right? This is what the objective also called for. So yeah, we're making inferences, but we're really analyzing the text using inferences. So the reading strategy is just the tool to help us get to the lesson level objective. This third part is really the conceptual why. Why is this important? So I just wrote, being able to understand what motivates characters in stories makes us better readers. It helps us relate to the characters as well as develop an understanding and deeper meaning for the story and the message the author is conveying. So, key points. Really quickly, what are they? Why are they important? So, key points, what we just saw, list out the knowledge and skills students need to master an objective. The right key points will drive us towards avoiding activity-driven planning, right? We're really focused on understanding what students need to be able to do in order to master a lesson level objective. Not necessarily if they're having fun or, enjoying the activity, right? We want them to have fun, we want them to enjoy what they're doing, but ultimately we really want them to be learning, right? We want them to understand that they are using these strategies and we're employing instructional methods that are ultimately helping them gain a skill. Finally, we also want them to break down new content in a comprehensible way. And we also want to ensure in our lesson vision that we're teaching the right stuff, right? We're not necessarily teaching inferencing about personality traits because that's not necessarily something we were looking for in the objective. So how do we know if they're good, right? So I think about accurate, appropriate, logically sequenced, and student-friendly. For accurate, I'm asking the question, is this the right stuff? Do I know the what, or the content? Do I know the how, or the procedural steps? And do I know the why for my lesson level objective? Is it appropriate? Is this the right level of rigor given where my kids are at? When I think about verbs, I think about Bloom's, right? Bloom's taxonomy. Am I asking questions at the right level of rigor? Is it not too hard and not too easy? Do I have the right number of questions or steps for this lesson level sequence? Not too few, not too many. Are my skill steps logically sequenced? Are the questions on the assessment sequenced in order for me to be able to gauge student understanding and check for understanding? Are my skill steps in my skills in the right order so that students are able to show student mastery? And finally, are they written in student-friendly language, right? Can I show my students this lesson level vision and say, hey, do you understand this, right? Am I writing and thinking like a second grader or an 8th grader? Will these words ultimately mean something to my students? So let's look for the what, the how, and the why. So, boom. Number one was pretty easy, right? It was the what. It was the sort of knowledge. It was the noun that I was looking for. The how, definitely embedded within that verb, analyze. It helped me develop skill steps for students to be able to take in order to make inferences and be successful with the lesson level objective. And finally, the why. Am I building a conceptual understanding so that students are able to understand that, yes, this lesson level objective is important if I want to develop competency in being a good reader? So there's 5 basic steps to vision setting at the daily lesson level, right? First, we want them to understand the objective. This step is non-negotiable. All teachers do it, and it always comes first. There's a couple ways to do this, right? You can examine relevant existing resources such as exemplar assessments, some curricular materials, sample student work, etc. You can connect the objective to the big ideas of your content areas and/or to your broader vision and goals, right? Then, after understanding the objective, you're going to begin to draft the vision, which includes the key points, the daily lesson assessment, and the exemplar student response. In terms of understanding and drafting key points, perform the objective yourself, possibly using an exemplar assessment while analyzing your own thinking and process. Use the questions from the accurate and appropriate criteria to drive your work. In considering a lesson assessment, consider what form your lesson assessment should take. This often mimics existing exemplar resources in curriculum, such as a Basel Reader and/or graphic organizers and/or other curricular materials your students are surrounded by. A couple options for this include exit tickets and/or quizzes, responses to oral questions, drafts of work in progress, completion of practice tasks, and you can also take anecdotal teacher notes on student actions during practice, right? Ultimately, we want you to use the questions from the aligned and scaffolded criteria to drive your work for the daily lesson assessment. In checking your work, the most essential way to do this is to complete the lesson assessment at the highest expected level of rigor. Then we're going to want you to ask yourself, is this the type of work students need to do to drive toward both the daily objective at the right level of rigor and toward our classroom vision and goals, right? Will my key points help drive toward this type of work? If no, right, you want to keep fine-tuning the daily lesson vision, right? And this is where your instructors come in. We ultimately are going to be spending a lot of time in 405 working towards building our conceptual understanding of lesson planning at the daily lesson level. And if yes, right, then we get to start having the fun. Then we begin to move on to daily lesson methods and begin to think about the instructional methods and activities we want to choose in order to have our students reach the outcome of that assessment. So this all goes back to a nice little framework called backwards design that you heard about in 403 and 404. The authors, Wiggins and McTeague, were one of the key readings you read. So we believe that good instruction begins with a goal, it's followed by an assessment, and then you start to plan instructional methods. We also want you to generate interesting activities, yes, but we want you to ask yourself, do these activities help my students accomplish the learning goal and objective? Bottom line, we're asking you, hey, is it aligned, right? Alignment throughout the vision and the lesson is the most important thing when it comes to choosing instructional methods and learning assessments for your students. So as we close out, we're going to go and focus on the you do, right? Here's something we want you to do prior to our next class. We want you to bring in your completed key points. Remember, that's the knowledge and the skills for the following lesson objective. Students will be able to describe the physical and personality traits of characters in the story by making inferences. So you can do this in your dialogic journal and or on a separate piece of paper, but either way, you're going to be turning this in as an entry ticket into class. When we say lesson vision, remember we're only talking about the nouns and the verbs, right? So you should be able to come in with a very sort of cohesive understanding of physical and personality traits. Maybe you want to define characters, but ultimately we're going to be also asking you to define that skill step, right? So what does describe mean, and what does describe mean by making inferences? If you want to reference this screencast, please rewind it, stop it at a couple parts. We can also send out a template if that would help you as well. All right, that concludes the screencast for this evening. We just want to say thank you in advance, and we look forward to seeing you in class.